With 2019 now wrapping up, I want to go back and take a look at some of the best PlayStation 4 games of the year, but specifically in today's video, I want to take a look at the top 10 single-player PS4 games of the year. Now, going back to the beginning of this generation, I think it's apropos to talk about this because this is really the last full year of the PlayStation 4 without a next-gen console being out. If you remember when the PlayStation 4 initially came out, probably right before that, there was all this talk that single-player games were on their way out, that the world was moving to multiplayer games, and those were the only games that were ultimately going to be able to be successful. And now you look at it at the end of the generation, and some of the best games on the market are entirely single-player focused, and that's what I'm looking at in this video. None of these games on this list have a multiplayer component. They are entirely single-player based, and they are great games at that. I do also want to note that I have decided to remove any remasters. Remakes are on the table, however, a simple remaster like Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition, that's not going to be on this list. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel games aren't going to be on the list either, so a couple of JRPGs are foregone there. Ni no Kuni Remastered, another one, but nonetheless, a lot of great games to get into, so let's get right into it, and I want to start things off with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Man, this was a game that before it came out, there was a ton of skepticism surrounding it, not necessarily because anyone was lacking faith in Respawn to deliver a good game, it's just on the basis that it was Star Wars and it was EA. EA hasn't had a great track record, and you remember what happened with Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. Yes, it was by an entirely different studio, it was a different style of game, but still, it was Star Wars, so that comparison was gonna be there, and that talking point was present, and Respawn had a ridiculous amount of pressure on their shoulders. And then when the game came out, I'm sure from a Respawn standpoint, it was probably pretty nice to prove everyone wrong, or prove the doubters wrong at least, and alleviate a little bit of that pressure off their shoulders, because it turned out to be an excellent game. Great story, awesome visuals, and the gameplay is really good as well. I was really surprised by just how much I liked Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I wouldn't even say that I am the biggest Star Wars fan in the world. I have appreciation for the franchise and the IP. However, I'm definitely not one of the hardcores, but even myself, I was able to get into Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and have a great time with it, and it's definitely a game I would recommend. Next up, here's one that I was really looking forward to leading into its release, but it didn't have that groundswell of hype, and that is A Plague Tale: Innocence. A Plague Tale: Innocence was one of those games that came out. It was done by Asabo Studio, a studio that was very unknown, and I think a lot of people were going into the release of this game not knowing what to expect, and then for a lot of other people that didn't even know the game was coming out, they were just shocked by the reception the game had. A Plague Tale: Innocence turned out to be an excellent narrative-driven experience, and yes, while it is light on the gameplay, the narrative is so strong that it really lends itself to being an excellent game, and it's one of those narrative-driven games that it doesn't take an hour, 2 hours for the story to really get going. No, it's right away when you boot up the game. It is gripping from the get-go, from its atmosphere, from its dialogue. The voice acting is excellent. The visuals, while I wouldn't say it's a technical masterclass, it had this very dark and drab style that only enhanced the overall atmosphere that the game was going for. I thought it was an excellent game. There are rumblings that a sequel is in development, which makes me very excited, and if you're not even sold by me talking about the game, there is a free demo available on the PlayStation Store. Check that out, and hey, that'll probably win you over. The game has been going on sale pretty frequently now, and I would strongly recommend it. Alright, next up we have Death Stranding. Death Stranding is another game that after it came out, there was a lot of mixed opinions. Some people absolutely loved the game, other people were not so thrilled with it. Obviously, it's a different kind of game, a lot of walking, and a real emphasis on its bold and artistic vision, and yes, it's very different, but I've been saying this a lot about Death Stranding, that even though there are gonna be some people that don't like this game, and I can completely understand why, there needs to be games that come out that are a little bit unique, that do try to stray from the normality, and that's exactly what Death Stranding does. It's an experimentation, it experiments a lot, and with these games that are more so experimentations, there are gonna be elements of the game that don't win a lot of people over, or a lot of people are just completely turned off by them. However, there's the catch-22 of that this is how gaming is ultimately going to evolve. Death Stranding is that kind of experimentation that is going to let gaming as an art form evolve, and I think for that reason the game deserves a lot of credit excited. Outside of that, there are still a lot of strong elements to the game. I mean, the visuals are stunning, a lot of the story elements are really well done, and it is a very interesting game. I don't want to get too in deep on some of the elements just to avoid spoilers, but I would still say it's a game that's very much worth playing, and it's already going on sale. It came out just a month and a half or so ago, and it's now down to $35 regularly. I would say that if you're a fan of Kojima's style of storytelling and the types of games he makes, you owe it to yourself to play Death Stranding, and I imagine if you are in that camp, you've already played it. But if not, do yourself a favor and check it out. Alright, next up we have Judgment. Judgment is of course a game done by Ryuga Gotoku Studios, or more often known as the Yakuza team. They've of course done Yakuza 1 through 6, they're doing Yakuza 7, and obviously they also did Yakuza 0, but they put out Judgment earlier this year over in the West. It actually came out in Japan last year, and Judgment was an excellent game. Obviously, Yakuza has had a renowned focus over here in the West, and we've seen Yakuza 0, all of the other Yakuza remastered on the PS4, and they're coming out, Yakuza 6. However, all of those games were not developed ground up for the PS4. That's where Judgment has an advantage, because from a technical standpoint, it is much stronger, and you really see those visuals shine through. There's English voice acting, which, yes, I know that sounds like an absolute sin to some people. However, to engage a newer audience, you do want to have English voice acting in there as an option, and if you do want to play the game with Japanese dialogue, that option is available as well. I thought the game was great, and I would highly recommend it whether you've played the Yakuza games in the past or you're trying it for the first time. And it's not a Yakuza game, it does tell a new story, and it's incredibly engaging to all people. Next up, we have a game that I am personally a gigantic fan of, and that is Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is a really interesting game that came out a while ago on PC. It was early access for a while, and then it got its final release, I believe, earlier this year, and the PlayStation 4 version also dropped earlier this year. And I think this game is such an interesting marriage of a roguelike title and a card game, and if you told me that on paper, I would be like, that is the most ridiculous combination of gameplay elements, but Slay the Spire did it very well. There's a lot of strategic elements to the game, a lot of interesting deck building ideas and methodologies have been flipped on their head just because you throw in that roguelike element. So that idea of crafting a deck that is a little bit thinner so you can get to your best cards as quick as possible and really balancing that, I mean, that's a regular thing in all card games, but doubly so when you do have this roguelike element to it. Getting the right items, choosing the right cards, there's just a ton of strategy to the game, and I'm not gonna lie, when I first started playing this game, I was getting absolutely destroyed, but the more you play it, the more you start understanding the mechanics, the better and better you get, and there's a reasonable amount of content in here as well. I know it's not gonna be a game for everyone, and a lot of you guys are just gonna be inherently off-put by it, but I thought it was a great title, and I would highly recommend you guys to at least give it a chance. Next up, we have a game that I often say is my game of the year. I don't know if I would go that far at this point, but Devil May Cry 5 I thought was excellent, and I'll be completely honest, going into the release of Devil May Cry 5, I did not know what to expect. It was the return of Devil May Cry, and I was just like, man, the game looks good, but I didn't know if it was gonna be as good as it turned out to be, and yeah, it turned out to be really freaking good. The gameplay is excellent, the music is awesome, and to double back on the gameplay, just how smooth it is and how satisfying it is great from a gameplay standpoint, and that's really what you want out of an action-oriented title. The story is a little bit off the wall. It's Devil May Cry, so I don't think you're expecting absolute narrative excellence. However, there is a pretty decent story in there, and also it does have a lot of lore elements from the previous Devil May Cry title, so if you're jumping in fresh for the first time, there is that too. And again, from an action standpoint, it is just awesome, and from that standpoint alone, it is very much worth playing. And next up, we have what looks to be Obsidian Entertainment's final brand new game on the PlayStation 4, and that is The Outer Worlds. Pillars of Eternity 2 is still set to come to the PS4, but that is a game that was released on PC quite a while ago. So if we're talking about completely fresh new games, it does look like Outer Worlds will be the last one, as Obsidian have been acquired by Microsoft, but Outer Worlds was a great way to go out. It's a really good sci-fi RPG that, yes, while it's not as colossally big as some of the other open world RPGs, I really enjoyed the fact of this game being a tighter and more focused game. I think this idea that every game needs to be this colossal megaton open world game with so much size and so much content, I think that's a little bit lost in gaming today, and I think sometimes that idea of just shoving in more content for the sake of having content does end up doing a game poorly. However, in The Outer Worlds, I thought all of that content had a purpose. I thought there was a lot of replayability in the content as well, so it inherently definitely made the game have more playtime. Gameplay was solid visually, aesthetically it was really good, and yes, well, I'm always gonna be upset of the fact that PlayStation 4 guys are gonna have to pay, you know, full price for the game while the Xbox and PC guys are paying $1 for 3 months of Game Pass. I still thought Outer Worlds was a terrific game, and I would highly recommend you guys to play it if you are into RPGs. Next up, we have a game that really surprised me, and that was Control from Remedy. Now, I was expecting Control to be a good game, and I've been a fan of Remedy for quite a while. Alan Wake was awesome. Quantum Break, not as good, but still a very good game, and the narrative to that game was very interesting. What really surprised me about Control was not the narrative. The narrative we knew was going to be pretty interesting and pretty strong. However, from a gameplay standpoint, I thought Control was ridiculously awesome. It just had this great gameplay that was incredibly flashy, incredibly vibrant, and a lot of variety in the gameplay as well. And not only that, again, from a Remedy standpoint, the story was very interesting. You have this mystery in there, and that makes the game pretty gripping throughout. I thought it was a great game, and at this point, it is getting cheaper and cheaper. I could understand why you would be a little hesitant at a full $60, but now that it is available for, you know, $25, $30, a much better buy, and I would highly recommend it. Next up, we have Resident Evil 2. When you look at Capcom, their two standout games this year were Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry 5. We already mentioned Devil May Cry 5. Monster Hunter World Iceborne was fantastic as well, but it was an expansion. Resident Evil 2 was tremendous. A ground-up remake for Resident Evil 2 that really stays true to the original while also modernizing the experience so it's engaging for everyone involved. The visuals are gorgeous. Gameplay is good, although it is a little bit puzzle-heavy, so bear that in mind. And if you did play the hell out of Resident Evil 2 back in the day and you know the layout and everything like that, you can complete the game rather quickly. But if you do go into it naturally and you take your time, the length isn't anything of an issue. And again, this is one of those games that while it did come out at $60 back in January of this year, it's been so many months later and it's readily available for south of $20, and I would highly recommend it. And by the way, this is one of the best reviewed games from the critics this year as well. It's got a 91 on Metacritic, which is pretty insane, and I would say I very much agree with that score. And lastly, I do want to note Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I thought it'd be apropos to mention this game last, just because it is winning a lot of Game of the Year awards right now from a lot of other outlets. Again, this isn't ranked in any way, but Sekiro Shadows Die Twice absolutely deserves a mention for its excellent as a single-player experience. 1500 Sengoku era Japan, and of course, it sees its resemblances to its Souls counterparts because it is a From Software title. However, it is very much different than Souls. I know a lot of people that were super into Souls and went into Sekiro expecting a Souls clone, and when they didn't get that, they were thrown on their butt a little bit and they got absolutely whooped. But once you come to understand the mechanics of Sekiro, it becomes that satisfying, brutal, action-oriented title that you know and love from Software. Would I say that it's their best game? I don't know if I would go that far. Bloodborne was pretty freaking good, but at this point, it's in line with all of other From Software's outings, and that means it's an excellent game and one of the best single-player experiences of the year. And that's gonna conclude this video. Again, 2019 has been such a remarkable year for single-player games, and I think it's very, very important to look at single-player titles in specific, because at the beginning of this generation, so many pundits, so many quote-unquote experts were saying that single-player games were on their way out. Multiplayer is the future. Multiplayer is where all the money is going to be made. And yeah, there's a lot of money to be made in multiplayer games, but single-player games absolutely have a fandom. They have a place in gaming, and you see it with quality games like all of the aforementioned titles coming out and doing rather well. That's going to conclude this video. Let us know your favorite PS4 single-player games of 2019 in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.